Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sammasambuddhassa. Namo buddhaya. I bow to the Buddha, our original teacher, Shakyamuni. All esteemed Buddhists, please be seated. We're going to study a discourse today, called the Lesser Discourse to Malunkyaputta. This discourse it's special. Almost all Buddhist treatises that speak about the fundamental nature of the Dharma often refer to this particular text. This is especially true for those who focus on the practical, realistic aspects of Buddhism and who argue that the Buddha's teachings are never based on far-fetched, abstract theories. For them, this discourse is a go-to reference. So, as we study the Nikaya collection, we can't, of course, cover every single discourse in the Tripitaka. We'll focus on a few key, representative texts to understand the core ideas of early Buddhism. These are some of the most prominent and often most familiar discourses. Previously, when I taught the Nikayas at other places, I tended to pick less common texts that were rarely taught. But this time, I don't know why, maybe the Buddha wants me to teach all the popular ones, all the discourses that other teachers are already very familiar with. Today we'll study this one, and next time we'll study the Angulimala Sutta. Does that sound familiar? It's also in the middle-length discourses. After that, we'll take a 2-week break. We'll resume on the 5th day of the 2nd lunar month. Yes, a 2-week break, because next term I have to organize a retreat at the monastery. I was originally scheduled to teach on the 18th, but because of the retreat, I'm starting earlier. So we'll take a 2-week break. Now, let's briefly go over the story in the sutta. The monastics here have the text, but for those who don't, I'll tell you a little bit about it. There was one time the Venerable Malunkyaputta. Malunkyaputta means the son of Malunkya. In those days in India, it seems there was a bit of a matriarchal system. While the Venerable was meditating alone in a quiet place, he suddenly had these thoughts. There are some fundamental questions that the Blessed One has never addressed. I have never heard the Blessed One explain them. He was wondering whether this world is eternal or not eternal. Back then, they used the word world, but today we would call it the universe. The meaning is the same, but the word is different. What he was wondering was, is everything in this world, this universe, subject to impermanence? We know that human beings die, flowers wither, a house eventually collapses. That's why we're already preparing to rebuild our main hall. It's getting old. I hope you lay people can help us out. It's about to collapse. That's how life is. It's impermanent. But is the entire universe impermanent? Will it eventually disappear? That was his question. Of course, the small things in the universe are definitely impermanent, but what about the whole thing? Is there a moment when the entire universe will just vanish into thin air? That was his question. Or will it last forever? He also wondered, are the soul and the body one and the same? Or are they different? In other words, is a person's life inseparable from this physical body? Or does life continue in another form after the body dies? He had never heard the Buddha speak about this clearly, and he asked, is the world finite or infinite? Does this universe have a certain boundary? A boundary where you reach a certain point and there are no more galaxies, no more stars, just endless empty space? Or is the universe endless, boundless? Can you just keep traveling forever and never reach an end? Those were his questions. He also had a major question about the Dharma, which sounds like a complete end. So he had these questions. He then thought to himself, I will go and ask the Blessed One these questions directly. If he answers them clearly and straightforwardly, I will continue my monastic life. But if the Blessed One cannot give me a satisfactory answer, I will give up the Dharma and return to lay life. His doubt was so strong, and he considered these things very, very important. The great questions about the universe, about human life, about the Dharma. He considered them of the utmost importance. Later that evening, after meditating, he went to the Buddha and said, Venerable Sir, while I was alone, these thoughts suddenly came to me. It seems that the Blessed One has neglected to speak about these great and important issues, so I have decided to come and ask you. If you know the answers, please tell me. And if you don't know, please be frank and say, I do not know, I have not seen this, so I can decide what to do. If the Blessed One doesn't give me a satisfactory answer, I am thinking of abandoning the Dharma and returning to lay life. So please, Blessed One, tell me, is this world eternal or not eternal? Does it eventually cease to exist? If you know, please explain. And if you don't know, please just be honest and say you don't know. And what about this? Is the world finite or infinite? Please, Blessed One, tell me. If you don't know, just be honest and declare, I do not know, I have not seen this, so I can decide. And are the soul and the body one and the same, or are they different? And does the Tathagata exist or not exist after death? Please let me know these things. If the Blessed One cannot answer me, I will abandon the Dharma and return to lay life. The Buddha then rebuked him, Malunkyaputta, when you first came to me to renounce and study the Dharma, did I ever promise you that I would answer, that I would speak about those things or not? Malunkyaputta replied, No, Venerable Sir. The Buddha continued, Did I promise you that I would tell you that the world is eternal or not eternal? Did I tell you that the soul and the body are one and the same or different? Did I tell you that the Tathagata will exist or not exist after death? Malunkyaputta replied, No, Venerable Sir, since I did not promise you, why are you making it a condition that you will abandon the Dharma and return to lay life if I do not answer? You fool! Who are you and what are you rejecting? This phrase means, are the person who first came to renounce and the person who now demands an answer to continue practicing the same person or two different people? The Buddha asked him, Who are you and what are you rejecting? I never made that promise, so why are you setting this condition? Then the Buddha continued and gave a very famous example, cited in almost every book written about Buddhism. He said, If someone says, I will follow the holy life with the Blessed One until he answers for me whether the world is eternal or not, and whether the Tathagata exists or does not exist after death, that person will wait until they die and still not hear the Tathagata's answer. The Buddha was affirming that he would never answer those questions. He then gave an example of a person who was shot by an arrow that was coated with a heavy poison. The person's family and relatives then invited a physician, a surgeon, to come and treat the wound. As a side note, this shows that at the time of the Buddha in India, people were already familiar with surgery. When you read this discourse, you can get glimpses of the culture and civilization of ancient India. When the doctor came to pull out the arrow and treat the wound, the person stopped him and said, I will not let this arrow be pulled out until I know who shot me. Was that person from the north or the south? I will not let this arrow be pulled out until I know what their name is, what their spiritual name is. I will not let this arrow be pulled out until I know if they are tall or short, fair-skinned or dark-skinned. I will not let this arrow be pulled out until I know what town or village the person who shot me belongs to. And what about the bow that shot it? I know the arrow is here, but was the bow made of wood or was it a crossbow? Was the bowstring made of vines or animal sinews or hemp? I will not let this arrow be pulled out until I know what kind of poison is on it. The Buddha then said, Malunkyaputta, that person will die without knowing anything at all. Why? Because the poison acts very quickly, but the time it would take to find out all of those things is very, very long. It is the same with this situation. Whoever waits for the Tathagata to answer them about those great issues, they will wait until they die, and the Tathagata will still not answer. The Buddha didn't say he didn't know. He just said he wouldn't answer. Malunkyaputta, the holy life does not depend on knowing whether this world is eternal or not. What I mean is that whether this universe is eternal or not, there will always be birth, sickness, death, sorrow, lamentation, and suffering. And I teach a path to get rid of them right now. Whether the world is finite or infinite, it is clear that there are still birth, sickness, death, sorrow, lamentation, and suffering. And I have proclaimed, taught, and shown the way to end those sufferings. Malunkyaputta, even if the Tathagata exists or does not exist after death, the reality is that birth, old age, sickness, death, sorrow, lamentation, and suffering still dominate human life, and the Tathagata has shown a way to overcome that sorrow, lamentation, and suffering. Therefore, Malunkyaputta, accept what I do not answer. The Buddha's words were so powerful. And accept what I do answer. And, Malunkyaputta, what I do not answer is this. Is this world eternal or not eternal? I do not answer. Is this world infinite or finite? I do not answer. Are the soul and the body one and the same? Or different? I do not answer. Does the Tathagata exist or not exist after death? I do not answer. Malunkyaputta, accept that these are the things I do not answer. And what do I answer? That this is suffering. Malunkyaputta, that is what I proclaim, I present, I answer. This is the cause of suffering. That is what I answer, I present, I proclaim, I speak of. This is the cessation of suffering. Malunkyaputta, that is what I explain, I reveal, I lay out, I proclaim, I guide. This is the path leading to the cessation of suffering. That is what I answer, I guide. I proclaim, I teach. Malunkyaputta, why? Because those things are related to the goal. Those things are the foundation of the holy life. Those things lead to dispassion, detachment, cessation, tranquility, higher knowledge, awakening, and nirvana. Therefore, I answer those things. Thus, Malunkyaputta, accept what I do not answer, and accept what I do answer. That is us reading the entire discourse, but not in its original form. I read it in a more contemporary style of prose. You see, when monastics speak about the Nikayas in the future, you should do the same, because the original prose is too far removed from our modern language. Listeners have a hard time understanding it. So, what do you think? How many points would you give me after hearing this discourse? Does anyone have any feelings or thoughts? Any thoughts? The truth is, Venerable Malunkyaputta was not as foolish as the Buddha said. His only mistake was the way he asked the question. In reality, all of us humans have this illness, or what we could call a great quality of being human, the thirst to know what we don't know. That is a fundamental characteristic of human beings. Animals may or may not have this thirst for knowledge. We don't know their minds. And besides, when we were animals in a past life, we've completely forgotten, so we can just assume that they don't have this thirst. But human beings all have this in common. We thirst to know what we don't know, and we are always searching for the cause of every single thing in this life. Think about when we were children. When it rained, we'd wonder and ask our parents, "Dad, why does water fall from the sky like this? Why does it rain?" And what would our parents say? Do you remember what they said? When you were little, they'd say something like, "The sky god is doing it," right? They just gave an answer to get it over with, to put an end to our wondering, because that feeling of not knowing is very uncomfortable. Regardless of whether the rain is caused by a sky god or not, we're still going to get wet, right? The first rains of the season often make you want to go home. The first rains of the season often make the trees touch. I mean, whatever the cause is, in reality, the rain still makes the rice fields green. It makes the trees blossom and bear fruit. It makes life feel fresh. That's the reality right in front of us. But we don't stop there. We want to find the cause. And we hear the answer, "The sky god does that." And we stop there. We believe it. And then we start to wonder about other things. When we grow up a little, our curiosity gradually goes deeper and deeper into many issues of human life. The way Malunkyaputta asked, he was actually a spokesperson for most of humanity, asking about the great issues of the universe, of human life, and of the Dharma. He was asking on our behalf, but his questions were a little different from the ones that most people wonder about. Although they were also big issues, usually if you were to ask about them, you would ask, where did the earth come from? Or where did human beings come from? If we wonder about the universe, we might wonder, when did the universe first appear? Or if we study the Dharma, we know that human beings, sentient beings, are in endless cycles of rebirth, living one life after another. So we might wonder, what was the first life of a sentient being like? There are also times when sentient beings are reborn as humans, and other times they're reborn as animals. When we look at birds, worms, and cows, we don't understand the original cause for why there's such a vast difference between us and them. So we wonder about many things. Malunkyapputta's doubts were a bit more elevated. Questions like, are the soul and the body one and the same or different? And does the Tathagata exist or not exist after death? Are a bit high level. Usually, the common questions that people wonder about are, where did human beings come from? Where did the universe originate? What was the first human life like? Is this universe finite or infinite? And so on. Many such questions. Does anyone here have a unique question? Maybe you're too surprised to think of one. So we see this in human curiosity. It's like our parents answering why it rains. In the past, other religions also gave answers. They answered so that people would feel at ease, stop wondering, and believe in that religion because it had supposedly solved the great issues of human life and the universe. So how did other religions answer? For example, when asked, where did human beings come from? How do other religions answer? From a supreme being, right? They gave that answer. And when asked, where did the universe come from? They also said, from a supreme being. That is an answer just like the one our parents gave us when we were children. When a human being receives that answer from a religious leader, they should understand that they are being treated like a child, and that answer is a superficial, hasty one. Is given to make people feel at ease so they don't wonder anymore. But then we see that it is not the truth. Because it is not the truth, it gradually reveals all the inconsistencies in that simple answer. So something that is true, the further it goes, the more logical it becomes. But something that is not true, the further it goes, the more illogical it becomes. So people will start to question, why would a supreme being, in their own peaceful existence, create a world, a universe, and create human beings with all their joys and sorrows? Why do that? Could it be that they were bored? Then many religions answer that the Supreme Being loves what they have created, loves the human beings that they have created. Then people will question again, if they love human beings, why did they bring so much suffering to this world? Why did they create all the mistakes of human beings? They created natural disasters, floods, droughts, earthquakes, wars, and illnesses, and now they are still not at peace. They are still creating diseases like AIDS that threaten humanity. Is it that the Supreme Being loves human beings? That's where the logical dead ends begin. We see this. If the Supreme Being is omnipotent, they created everything, right? If they are all-powerful and created everything according to their will, then clearly they created the mistakes of human beings and created the suffering in this world. Is there a lot of suffering in this world? Yes, a lot of suffering. So if they created the mistakes and suffering for human beings, do they love human beings? No, they don't. So if there really is a supreme being who created human beings and the world, and in the end we conclude that this being does not love the sentient beings they created, then is that being worthy for us to worship? No, they aren't. If they don't love us, why would we worship them? We only worship those who love us. Do you agree with me? We only worship those holy beings who love us. So when you monastics suddenly gain great authority with sentient beings, why is that? It is only when you have boundless loving kindness for all sentient beings that you will naturally have great authority. People will feel a deep love for you when they meet you. It is because loving kindness is so important. So even if there is an all-powerful being who created everything, that being would not be worthy of our worship if they did not have loving kindness. Now let's consider this. What if this being is both loving and all-powerful, but suffering still exists throughout this world? So what is this being? Clearly, they are powerless, right? They love sentient beings, but sentient beings are still suffering, which means that being does not have the ability to end the suffering. Does that sound logical? So that being is powerless and cannot do it. If that being is powerless, are they omnipotent? No, they are not. If they are not omnipotent, can they create the universe? So they cannot create everything. And if they cannot create everything, can they still be called a supreme being? So if that being loves sentient beings deeply, they are not a supreme being. But if they are an all-powerful supreme being, they do not have loving kindness and are not worthy for us to worship. Therefore, the superficial, hasty answer from the beginning of time, that anything we don't understand the cause of we attribute to a supreme being, leads to a dead end. In the end, there is no supreme being at all. We also see that humans have a habit of liking new things and getting bored with old things. For centuries, people just heard of one god, so they got bored and created many other gods, with each one in charge of a small part of life. For example, for fire, they created a fire god. If two tribes went to war, there was a war god. In Greek mythology, there were many gods. Venus was the goddess of love, there was a god of war, and Zeus was like the highest supreme being. There were many such gods. In African tribes, there were mountain gods and river gods. So it's because of human psychology of liking new things. Anything that stays the same for a long time becomes boring. It's the same psychology we see today. We always want to listen to new music, don't we? We don't like listening to the same song over and over again. It's also like fashion. At first, pants were wide, then gradually they were tapered a little, then they had holes in the knees, then a slit in the middle, then gradually they flared out again. And when we get bored, we taper them again. That's just human nature. And we see here there are three states that we can compare and evaluate. The first is to answer hastily, for example, by saying there is a supreme being who created everything. The second is to be unable to answer and to be flustered. The third is not to answer, but to do so with composure and dignity, which is the Buddha's way. The first two approaches, the answer-it-all approach, comes from a place of not knowing but wanting to show that one is knowledgeable. The second approach, being flustered and unable to answer, shows that this person does not know but is at least a little bit honest. But in the case of the Buddha, he did not answer, and he did so with great dignity. He was firm and sharp and full of composure. He affirmed that if a person waited for him to answer, they would wait until they died, and he still would not answer. He didn't say he didn't know. He just said he would never answer those questions. Why didn't he answer? He answered simply because it was not related to the practice of liberation to the cessation of suffering. We'll discuss more about why the Buddha didn't answer later. But for now, let's just understand it simply as the Buddha said. It's not related to the practice. It's like no matter the cause of the rain, the first and foremost thing is that the raindrops make us feel cool, they make farming possible, and sometimes they even give us a feeling that inspires us to write a poem. Rain has been falling since ancient times. Rain falls towards a dreamy path. Rain brings eternal sadness to us. Rain falls outside the yard at night. Rain falls and never stops. So, we see that the dignity with which the Buddha refused to answer was, first, that the way Malunkyaputta asked seemed rude and lacked faith in the Buddha. He said, "If the Buddha doesn't know, please be frank and say so I can leave." This implies that when he had those doubts, in his heart there was a vague thought that the Buddha did not know everything. Here we see the Buddha is called a rightly and fully awakened one who knows all. So it's not that he didn't know, but he was determined not to answer, not to be flustered or hasty. Because Malunkyapputta's way of asking was rude. If I had been in that situation, I wouldn't have answered either. In Buddhism, if one does not have enough reverence, the Dharma is not spoken. Here, most of the monastics have received the Bhikkhu precepts, haven't you? Most of you have? Well, in the Bhikkhu precepts, there's a minor rule that says you should not speak the Dharma to a layperson if you are standing in a high place and they are in a low place. You can't speak the Dharma if you are standing and they are sitting. You can't speak the Dharma if you are sitting and they are lying down. What does that mean? It means we don't speak the Dharma to a person who has no reverence for it. We must understand it that way. So here, because Malunkyaputta asked with a lack of faith, the Buddha didn't answer. It's similar to that rule in the precepts. Another thing is that in Malunkyapputta's way of asking, he demanded to return to lay life. He said, "If the Buddha doesn't answer, I will give up this holy life." Why is that a mistake? It's because he dared to gamble his ideal of practice. If the Buddha answers, I'll practice. If he doesn't, I won't. This means he considered his ideal of practice to be very light, all because of a single doubt. He didn't see that birth and death is a great matter, that the cycle of rebirth is a great suffering. He didn't see that sorrow, lamentation, and suffering continued to weigh heavily on his soul. He didn't see that selfishness and ego-clinging had filled his soul and were pushing him into the endless cycle of rebirth. He didn't see that those issues were the important ones. Instead, he dared to take a gamble to place his ideal of practice on a bet. This is a great mistake. There are two reasons why those issues should not be answered. First, because science must develop to a very high level to be able to answer some of them. Second, because some issues are a matter of personal realization. You can't just know them through ordinary knowledge. This is the difficulty with science. 2,500 years ago, everything was still very primitive, so it was not possible to explain everything. At that time, they couldn't even answer why it rained. They could only say that a dragon was doing it. But now, what do we say? We say it's water vapor that gathers in the sky, encounters cold air, condenses and falls as liquid. We explain it that way. We've studied this now, but 2,500 years ago, it couldn't have been answered. And there are many issues that are not simple. For example, why do children resemble their parents? We explain it with genetic inheritance, right? But 2,500 years ago, was this known? No, it wasn't. And now, to understand genetic inheritance, we have to study for years. If at that time, someone came and asked, "Venerable, please tell me why children resemble their parents," the Buddha would have to stand there and lecture to them for 11 years, and then he could start talking about genes. It would be a huge waste of time. Time is meant for sitting and practicing to achieve enlightenment, not for answering every question. The second reason for not answering is that some issues require inner realization. They can't be known through ordinary thought. This is very strange. For example, we talk about matter. Matter is rough and hard, but what is its nature? Why does it create a force of attraction? Like when we stand here, the ground attracts us. By what force? Gravity, right? The gravitational force. And in the solar system, the Earth revolves around the sun. What is that? It's due to the gravitational force between the two celestial bodies, and at the same time, the centrifugal force pulls the Earth away. It's a balance, so it keeps spinning. But where does that gravitational force come from? Why does matter create this force? Until now, it has not been explained. And it might take another 1,000 years for us to explain it. And perhaps when we find the true nature of matter, science will have to step into the realm of spirituality. So when we understand everything like this, we must know how to restrain our thirst for knowledge, our curiosity. We must know that this is not the time to resolve these doubts. We must know how to restrain ourselves not to be impulsive like the Venerable Malunkyaputta, who was so tormented and driven by his doubts that he dared to gamble his ideal of practice for them. So we must know how to restrain our doubts because there are essential, immediate things that need to be done first. Another thing we must pay attention to is that our knowledge, which we call wisdom, has a cause. What is the cause? Who knows the cause of wisdom? Loving kindness itself is the cause of wisdom. This is a reversed formula. When we love a person, we put our mind into observing their life, and naturally we understand many things about them. That is because loving kindness itself has given us understanding about that person. Conversely, understanding also makes us have loving kindness. But the cause and effect is that loving kindness comes first and understanding comes second. If we don't have either, we should cultivate loving kindness first, and wisdom will come later. Don't be hasty to seek wisdom first, because that is the branch. If we don't have loving kindness and we seek knowledge, knowing every single discourse and solving every single doubt, it's still just the branch, and we will fall apart. So let's start with loving kindness, with compassion, and we will naturally know many miraculous things. I'm telling you the truth. When you monastics can have loving kindness for all sentient beings, your wisdom will naturally manifest. Suddenly, you will have many things to say to people. You'll become a Dharma teacher, even though you never wished to be one. You won't want to be famous. You will just want to help people so much that you naturally see that this issue needs to be resolved, needs to be supplemented, needs to be contributed to. Then suddenly wisdom is awakened, and you speak eloquently, and it comes from that loving kindness. And so, the doubts of the Venerable Malunkyaputta, as well as the common doubts of humanity, like where did the universe come from? And what was the first human life like? Are questions that go to the very core, to the absolute. And to understand them, it requires a wisdom that is also as profound and absolute. And according to the law of cause and effect, to have an extremely great absolute wisdom, you must have an absolute foundation first. You must have absolute loving kindness, right? You must have absolute loving kindness, absolute morality, absolute meditative concentration, and only then will you have infinite wisdom. Therefore, those doubts are worthy for us to try to understand, but the path to understanding them still requires us to go back to the beginning, to the path of the Eightfold Path, to the path of morality, of loving kindness and compassion. We must go back to the foundation that the Buddha taught. There is no other way. If you want to understand the great issues of human life and the universe, you must continue to practice, because the result always comes after the cause. In some other discourses, the Buddha also spoke about the universe and the origin of human beings coming from the heavenly realms. What's strange is that in the long discourses, there is a text where the Buddha spoke about the origin of human beings coming from the Brahma realm, but not a single book cites it. It's as if people find it too strange or hard to believe. They doubt whether the Buddha said it or not because it sounds so odd. The Buddha told that when the earth was just formed, the soil was delicious and gave off a fragrant scent that reached the Brahma heavens. The devas from there came down to play and ate the soil, and when they ate it, they lost their supernatural powers and could not fly back. They had to stay here. That was the initial cause of human beings living on earth. I personally have a hard time believing that. However, I understand that it seems to be more of a fable than a true story. A fable that says when human beings are greedy, they naturally lose their merit. And when they lose merit, their circumstances are no longer convenient. It seems that the Buddha was embedding that principle in that story. Conversely, a person who lives a life of letting go, of altruism, of sympathetic joy, if anyone needs something, they give it all away, they will see that their circumstances will naturally become convenient and easy. This is not something that we have to wait for the ancient, distant past. It's happening right now in this life where people are still full of selfishness and hatred. If someone can overcome greed and live a sacrificial and altruistic life, they will see that their circumstances will naturally become more and more convenient. For example, if you have money, you give it all away. You help anyone who needs help. Then one day, when you need something, just the thought arises, and matter will come to you immediately. And the reason we lose merit is because we are greedy and worried. We worry about tomorrow, about not having enough. We worry about something that might not even be true, and then we create karma by hoarding, grabbing, and holding on tightly. If a person goes against that, lives a sacrificial and altruistic life, and doesn't worry, they will see that every day they live, it will be a day of peace and joy, and their circumstances will naturally become convenient. However, you have to do good deeds for at least 3 to 5 years before you start seeing the results. Many people say, why is it that I also go to the monastery, listen to the teachings, and give, but I'm still suffering? I ask, how long have you been doing it? Only for a few months. That's not enough. You have to do it for at least 3 to 5 years, and then you will see that your circumstances change immediately. And when you do good deeds like that, deep in your heart, don't wish for merit. If you don't wish for merit, you will get what you want. So, for those issues to practice and to teach, we also need some knowledge. But don't be too far-fetched, distant, and unrealistic. Don't tire your mind by knowing too much. I'm the same. I don't read many books. Many people who hear me lecture eloquently think that I am very knowledgeable and have read everything. The truth is, I'm lazy to read. I read very little. I only read the books that are necessary for my practice and teaching. As for metaphysical issues, we see that Confucius also frankly refused to answer questions about them. There was a person who asked him where a person goes after they die. He answered, "I have not died yet, so I do not know." Confucius had the courage to say, "I don't know." That is a wise person, right? He was very honest and very brave. He was not flustered. He was also very composed, but he admitted that he didn't know. In this way, Confucius was quite similar to the Buddha, except that the Buddha knew but he didn't say it because it was not the right time. However, a little bit of basic knowledge about great issues can still give us peace of mind to practice. For example, is the universe permanent or not? We have many theories. For example, some say that the universe was formed and gradually developed, and at some point it will decline and be destroyed, and then it will be reformed again. The whole universe keeps being formed and destroyed. There is such a theory. There is another theory that says it's not like that. For example, in this universe, there are many galaxies, many celestial bodies, and when one celestial body is destroyed, another one appears. So there is always a universe, but in that universe, there are many celestial bodies that appear and disappear. Then there is a theory that the universe first appeared from an explosion called the Big Bang. Where did that come from? It also came from a priest, a bishop, who was also an astronomer. He looked up at the sky and saw that the galaxies were getting farther and farther away from each other. And he thought, then in the past they must have been together in one place. Now they are moving farther away, which means in the past they were close. Is that conclusion logical? It's very logical, right? So if they were closer and closer, it means that in the past they were all in one single point and then they exploded. And on their way, they moved farther and farther away, and they formed stars, celestial bodies, and planets. And today, the whole world is trying to solidify this theory. But I have a feeling that what we see is often not true. For example, in the past, we always saw the sun rise in the east and set in the west, right? And what did people conclude? That the sun revolves around the earth, right? Our eyes clearly saw that. So the sun revolves around the earth. Is that conclusion logical? It's very logical. But is it correct? No, it's not. Isn't that strange? There are some truths that are completely opposite to what we see. So the fact that we see the galaxies moving farther away and then conclude that in the past they were all in one place and exploded from a single point, we might be making the same mistake as in ancient times, where we conclude something based on what we see. We might be wrong. And after the Tathagata has passed away, does he exist or not exist? This means, after the Buddha has entered nirvana, does he exist like a divine being or does he disappear into nothingness? If we understand that he exists like a divine being, it's like a story where he appears and does amazing things. And if we hear it said that nirvana is like the firewood has been used up and the fire has been extinguished, we understand that the Buddha entered nirvana and disappeared. Both ways of understanding are wrong. The Buddha, after entering nirvana, did not disappear, but he did not exist as a divine being. He became the entire universe, all sentient beings, always by our side to respond and give us blessings. It is always like that. The things we pray for, sometimes they are miraculously answered, and it is due to the help of the divine beings. But the initial response is from the Buddhas. When we sincerely pray to the Buddhas, the divine beings, and Bodhisattvas all help us in a specific way. But the Buddhas do not directly help. They only use their spiritual power and their virtue in nirvana. And the specific help we receive is from the divine beings. And what about the first life of a sentient being? We can only know that when we are enlightened. And even if we know, we can't speak of it. There is a theory that says in the beginning, our minds were pure, and then one moment of unawareness arose, and we entered into the cycle of rebirth. Have you heard that theory? Now let's reconsider it. We practice to end this delusion and return to this purity, right? The goal now is to return to the purity we had in the past. But is there a point in that? Because that purity from the past could not protect itself and it allowed unawareness to arise. Now we practice to return to this purity, But what's the point if it might not be able to protect itself again and another moment of unawareness might arise? So the theory that says sentient beings were originally pure and then had one moment of unawareness is a wrong theory. So there are many issues that we can understand a little bit about so we can have peace of mind to practice. We don't need to be too concerned about them. People have gradually developed new knowledge, and they also have a thirst to find the absolute truth of the universe. But they don't answer incorrectly. They answer slowly. They know one thing and they seek two. They know two and they seek three. They know three and they seek four. Gradually until one day they find the scientific absolute. That is also good. But only when science expands into the concept of spirituality will they be able to go much farther. Many spiritual phenomena happen in this world, but scientists, because of their self-imposed limitations, have not recorded them or statistically analyzed them to include them in their scientific theories. They just leave the spiritual phenomena all over the world for the spiritualists to study, while they only focus on physics. This is a weakness of science.